I did it.
You did it. Wow. Congratulations. You've now pressed a button. You're the record button.
I press all the buttons, let's be honest.
Press my buttons doing it right now. Anyways, so with that, what's going on, guys? And welcome back to the Nut Up Show. This is this is the show where Andrea and myself get together and talk about the things that we're doing to live the best life possible. Just nut up or shut up, right? And just get stuff done so that you can kind of have the life that you want. And a big part of that is stuff to do with health and making sure that we're healthy.
Absolutely.
And that leads into what we're going to be talking about today, which is vitamin D.
So, yes.
Right. So I know you want a preamble too here. So talk about it. So I guess if you haven't heard, I guess vitamin D is something that has been shown. Well, you know what? I just won't say anything because I don't want to say anything that's not incorrect. So I'll just let you just open your mouth.
Okay.
Start talking.
Oh,
and I'll stop talking.
Okay. So I think kind of how we're going to work it today is it's kind of going to be like a sandwich. I like sandwiches.
Can you move up this way? You're
sorry.
bothering me. You're off tilt.
So it's going to kind of be like a sandwich today. So we're going to be talking about like what you can control and how you can take personal responsibility. And then we're going to talk about how that relates to vitamin D. And then we're going to bookend that with like how you can use vitamin D to control your health kind of thing.
Right.
So that's how we're going to go today. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was control and this pandemic. I think we can all recognize that people have been in a huge fear state during this pandemic and feeling like there's not a lot that they can control and making decisions based on fear.
Right.
And I think the media has a huge part to play in this. So one of the Navy SEALs I listen to, Andy Stumpf, he always has a lot of really great things to say. And he uses this really great analogy. And it's like you have two circles. You have like one small one and then it's inside a bigger one. In the bigger one, you can think of that as your circle of concern. The things that really make you fearful, make you worry.
Things that bother you.
Things that bother you. Things that the existential stuff.
Your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
How am I going to get groceries or how's work going?
No, not even. Like, is a comet going to hit planet Earth and are we all going to die like the dinosaurs?
Oh.
Like stuff like that, right? Like things you could worry about. Is an alien going to abduct me? Like really big things.
Okay.
Or even really little things, right? That's your circle of concern, what you're concerned.
Like, am I going to get struck by lightning
Am I going to get cancer? Yeah, exactly. You can't control whether that's going to happen or not. Well, to some extent. So then the inner circle is your circle of
like influence.
Influence. Yes.
Right.
What can you influence in your life? What can you actually take control of to, mitigate whatever's going to happen?
Right. And that circle fits inside the big overall circle.
Yeah. And so the point is that's where you need to be spending your time and energy and effort is within that circle.
Right. And not worrying about what if an asteroid hits? Like, listen, you can spend your time worrying about it, but nothing you can do, unless you decide to go ahead and become a super crazy engineer and develop some kind of laser that can shoot this stuff out of the sky. If not, then probably best not to worry about it.
Yeah. And he makes like a lot of really good, and like, that's the whole point is like, there's no use getting yourself worked up and wasting all of that mental and emotional energy worrying over these things that you just can't control because it's just going to make you feel sick and you're not going to be able to sleep, which is going to make your life horrible. So I think it's a really good way to think about things.
It's almost like that saying, just don't sweat the small stuff.
Yeah.
Although it's not small, maybe they could be really big, but it's pretty much the same thing. It's like, just don't worry about it.
And I think he gave like one really good example. I'll link to in the show notes on our webpage to kind of like a
webpage. What are you, 1999?
Is that what it's called?
Our website.
I don't know.
I'll put it on the Googles.
On the Google. So the one thing, the kind of like a condensed version of this that he says, and it's really great to listen to. It's only about 4 or 5 minutes. It's just like a section from when he was on the Rogan podcast. So I'll link to it. It's like I said, it's really short. But the other thing that he said is like, obviously being a SEAL, he has like crazy experience in war zones. And he was talking about if you get in a firefight and you have to think about what your circle of influence is and what you're able to do. And if you just stand there kind of behind a wall and everything else is happening around you, and you're paralyzed by fear,
right,
you're not going to have a good ending, because you need to
not.
actually do something to get out of that situation. And so I think a lot of people can be paralyzed by fear, not just within the pandemic, but even like big life decisions, right? Are you going to take that jump and get married? Are you going to take that jump and have kids? Like, otherwise you stay paralyzed, and then, 10 years go by and you've missed your chance.
They don't actually do anything.
Exactly.
A lot of people have that happen to them.
Yeah. So this is where personal responsibility comes in, because within your circle of influence, you can understand what your circle of influence is in your circle of control. You can recognize it, but then you have to actually act on it by taking responsibility for your choices and for what you can control.
Right.
Which I think is really important. And so not only do you need to take action, but in order to take action, you need knowledge, right? And you need some type of wisdom.
Well, you don't necessarily need knowledge to take action, but it'll help you make a better decision, or make a better action, I guess, if that's...
Take a more informed action.
Right.
The problem is, and the problem that I have, and why I wanted to talk about this today, is that it's difficult when our public health agencies, when our government and the other people in our media do not give us the information. And I feel really disappointed and upset that we are not being given the proper information.
Yep.
We have not been told. We know what the comorbidities are for COVID, and they're all chronic diseases. No one has said you need to lose some weight and eat better. That is not being said. Vitamin D, which we're going to talk about today, there's one paper saying we could get the mortality rate to almost 0 if people had adequate vitamin D. No one is talking about this.
Right.
And I think it's shameful. So that's why I wanted to talk about it today.
Yep. We'll link to that paper, I'd imagine. This one you're talking about that has 0%, or they claim. Well, I mean,
they say theoretically.
Right. I have a lot of questions to that. That's a pretty bold claim.
Yeah. Well, we could theoretically get it to 0. Yeah. So, any questions?
Well, no. I mean, there's a thing. I don't want to start doing things about like, oh, I saw this headline or whatever, and just start saying it's fact. But I could believe it. It was a video that kind of came up, and it was just saying that, the trust in the media in North America, or sorry, not the trust in the media, but the trust in the government and what the government says. Maybe it was in the media too, I can't remember, but it's just at an all-time low. And that makes sense. I mean, you can look at clips. Here's an example from the States. There's clips, I think it was back in May, where it was like, Joe Biden and Harris or whatever, they're all saying, and the CDC was saying, now that you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask anymore. Yeah. Indoors, outdoors, and you don't have to social distance. You're vaccinated, you're protected. Yeah. That was just in May this year. And now it's November, and that's long gone. Now it's like, oh, you're vaccinated? Well, you still have to wear a mask, still have to social distance, so... And then again, you look at what happened even at the start. It's like, oh, well, you don't have to wear a mask because it doesn't do anything. And then it's like, you have to wear a mask now, and then you could double mask it. And then, so when the message keeps changing, like, how can you trust what the government's doing, and whether they're lying because they don't want a mass panic or tell people the truth, or they're just winging it because they don't really know. So they're just kind of making it up as they go until they get more data, which I don't know, which will probably be the better way to go, but I feel like it's just lying for the sake of not wanting the truth to come out. I think
there's ulterior motives that we're not privy to, where we can take a guess of, I guess.
Yeah. So, and it's just speculation or what have you. But so I don't know if I want to get into that kind of stuff, because it's not really the point.
That's not the point of today. The point of today is, even if we are not being given the proper or all of the information, again, this is where, look at your circle of control. You can do your own research. You can listen to our podcast.
Yeah. To be honest, I really hate that saying.
Okay, to be honest, that's not how he meant it.
I know that's not how you meant it, but I just, when I hear people say, do your own research, like, what does that mean? You can't go to a lab and start doing stuff. And when most people say that, they mean just like, well, go on YouTube or go on Google and just type in something. And of course you're going to find something that agrees with your worldview.
Yeah. So
what I would say, sorry, just last thing. I would say, go and look at the scientific publications and the stuff that's coming out in the literature that's being published on all the different journals, not just one, and read what actually is saying and what actually these papers are saying. Because even what an actual paper saying and what the media portrays, that even specific paper saying is completely different. So that's what I would say is just read the publications of what's going on. And they're hard reads and they're difficult, but
and then the caveat,
you can get used to it.
Then the caveat to that is then look who's funding the paper as well.
Well, that's a whole other thing too.
So that's yeah.
A good example I can give, which I think a lot of people could relate to, a lot of the publications that were done, what was it, in the 50s and 60s or whatever, about smoking. And remember, it was a big debate as to whether this was good or bad for you. And then you look at all the papers and stuff for funding. I mean, the tobacco industry was funding the researchers, right? So of course there's gonna be bias there, right? So and if you look at the same thing today, I mean, you look at who is funding, say for example, the FDA and who the FDA approves. I mean, the pharmaceutical company is one of the primary funders of the FDA, right? So is there a conflict of interest there? I don't know. You tell me. You tell me if that's a conflict of interest or not.
I mean, we talked about a little bit of this in our generic podcast.
Right. That's right. Yeah. That's right.
Because then the executives from the FDA then go to work for the drug companies after they're done. So, but anyways, the point is that today we're going to talk about what you can control and the research that I've gone through, and it's significant.
Right.
So it's not just like a one-off paper, or it's not just someone wearing a tinfoil hat on YouTube. It's actual physicians and researchers. And
for us, I mean, I have a master's degree in biology. You have an honors degree in biology and molecular biology
and biotechnology.
So
this is my wheelhouse.
Yeah, so we know how to do research and
we know how to read papers.
We know how to read papers and kind of tease them out. A lot of the training that I've had, especially with my master's, was knowing how to actually go to academic papers and actually review them and question their credibility and see where the flaws are in each paper, because every paper has flaws. They're not perfect.
But that's like what you do. That's one of your classes in a master's, because I did like half of a master's.
Yeah. Well, some people don't have to take it. But
but the one class I took, that's what you do. It's like you do you read your journal and then you critique it, your journal article.
Yeah. I don't know if they even do that anymore. I'm sure some courses they still teach that.
I think they do. Yeah.
Anyways,
so vitamin D, let's go on to vitamin D. So vitamin D, we can talk a little bit about what it actually is. So vitamin D is
it's a vitamin.
So it's a fat soluble vitamin. And so this will be important a little bit later, because there's two types of vitamins. There's vitamins like vitamin C and the B vitamins are all water soluble. So if you take too much of it, like you can't OD on it. Right. You just pee it out.
So water soluble just goes through your body, and then if you have too much, it just piss out. And I guess fat soluble would be the opposite of that. It just collects.
It collects in your fat.
In your fatty tissues.
So just think about if you take like a multivitamin or something, and your pee is going to be like bright yellow. That's like you just peeing out the vitamins.
Right.
Just peeing.
The ones that are water soluble anyways.
That money down the drain. Yeah, basically.
Well.
No, that's why like I'm really specific about supplements. So
right.
You have to be really careful. But yeah, so fat soluble, it's different. It's stored in your fat. And if you take it, that fat soluble vitamin, if you're taking vitamin D as a supplement, you need to take it with fat so that it's absorbed better into your body.
What if you are already fat?
Doesn't matter.
You sure?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Just thought I'd ask.
That's fine. So we get 90% of our vitamin D from the sun. So the UVB hits our skin and then it is created.
UVB, just radiation.
Yeah, UVB light. I'm not going to go into any of the biochem stuff because it's a lot and there's so many different forms and it's just too much.
You go out there, you get the sun, you get a face full of beautiful celebration rays. It looks warm outside.
Yeah.
And then your body, whatever, through the sun, it just does some chemical reactions and then boom. Produces vitamin D in the body. It's got what the body needs.
So then the other 10% comes from organ meats, eggs, and fish.
Organ meats?
Organ meats, like liver, kidneys.
Oh, organ meats. Right.
Yeah.
Stuff that no one eats.
Exactly.
Right.
So,
so wait a minute. Are you saying that we're going to have liver tonight? Is this where this is going?
No, I have post-traumatic stress about liver and onions. I was force-fed as a child. So thanks, Mom and Dad. So Vitamin D is important for so many things. The main thing that most people have heard about that it's important for is bone health, because it helps in your stomach. It helps absorb calcium, magnesium, and phosphate, which is all in your bones.
Okay, so interesting. I was going to say, you said bones. Now I'm going to say, well, isn't that what calcium is? And drink your milk. So you don't want to have...
You need D to absorb it. You need D to help out.
To help absorb the different minerals for creating bones, like calcium, magnesium.
Just bone health.
Just bone health. Okay, sure. Yeah. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So not only that, it regulates a lot of different processes. So your body making insulin, which is kind of important.
We've talked a whole lot about
insulin. It has huge immunity regulations. So not just the production of like your adaptive immune response, which is your adaptive immune response is what is being activated through vaccines. So it's important for that, but it's also important just like for innate stuff. So just kind of your surveillance system in your body.
Right. Because whenever you say eat a piece of dirt or whatever, it's going to get activated if it finds any kind of organisms, and that shouldn't be there, right? So,
yeah.
Because your immune system's always working, right?
Always.
So
yeah,
it's always on the prowl, on the hunt.
On the hunt. Blood pressure, it deals with blood pressure, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Has implications in cancer, arthritis, cardiovascular disease, on autoimmune diseases. And the really cool thing that I found out about vitamin D is it actually has antiviral properties in itself, which is really cool. So especially like encapsulated viruses, which is what COVID is, or SARS-CoV-2 is.
Yeah.
So I thought
or
that
any
was
kind
really
of cold,
cool.
I would imagine too.
Influenza. Dengue,
coronaviruses too, right?
Dengue fever, actually, they showed like a lot of efficacy with using vitamin D to help mitigate symptoms of dengue fever, I think.
It's interesting, because it's like, it's vitamin D. It's like...
Yeah, it's really cool. So I'll link to that paper. The problem is that most people are deficient because...
I would say most people in, I guess, the West or whatever, because we live in places where it gets like snow and...
Not the West, the higher or lower latitudes, right?
Yeah, but I mean, like, isn't it something ridiculous? Like 60% of people live above like the 40-degree line or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, anyways.
Yeah, so some of the people at highest risks are those that live at higher latitudes. This is us in Canada. If you live in a place where there's lots of pollution, the sun isn't able to get to you, obviously, as well, because it can't get through the pollution. So that's one thing.
Jesus, what place is there? I guess some places in China, I guess I would imagine it's so polluted that. But that's... Yeah, but the problems. If it's so polluted that you can't see the sun, like I don't know how that's insane.
Yeah, but people that have darker skin, because you have more melanin in your skin, and it's like a natural sunscreen. Yeah, they even say, I read somewhere,
but still, it's got to counteract, because if you have darker skin, you're generally living in a place that's like warm all the time, so you're still outside and still getting all that stuff. So I'm sure your body regulates that.
Well, that's the point of that adaptation, right? Exactly. Yeah. And then also, if you're an older person, the older you are, the less efficient your body is at transforming that UVB.
Getting older, it's just you're less efficient at everything. So you're just gonna have to deal with it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So those are like the highest risk people for deficiency. So even if, here in Canada, like I'm outside all the time in the winter, I love being outside, but like
you're still covered up, though, right?
Smallest part of skin is like exposed. Right. So most people are going to be deficient.
Well, let me ask you this question. So you're setting up the table that most people here, especially in North America or Canada, US, whatever, are deficient. I'm sure all over Europe as well too, right? Come on.
Yeah.
Europe, Scandinavia, all those places.
Yeah.
So what is the amount of sunlight that you would need to get on a daily basis to not be deficient?
It's really funny because you asked me this question before and I knew you were going to ask it today.
Well, of course, because that's like you're saying we're deficient. Okay, well then how long do I need to just go with like shorts and t-shirt kind of thing?
There was one study that I read that if you go outside in the summer only 2 to 3 times a week for like half an hour, you're good.
So then we're definitely not deficient during the summer, but it stores in your fat, right? So if you're outside all summer long, because you said, 30 minutes?
2 to 3 times a week.
So that's 100, like an hour and a half, right? So that's like 90 minutes a week of like direct sun, like with shorts and t-shirt kind of thing.
Yeah.
So if that's an hour, so can't you just compound that? So if I'm just outside 8 hours a day, because I'm working in the farm or whatever, 8 hours a day times 5 days a week, that's 40 hours. That's 40 times the amount of vitamin D but then you do that for 8 months or whatever, well, 6 months, whatever in the summer, don't you just bioaccumulate a bunch of vitamin D that can help you carry out throughout the winter? Like you know what I mean? Because you said it's soluble or it's fat soluble.
That's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that.
All right.
So, but it's a really good question.
I'm gonna bank some vitamin D. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Know what I'm saying?
You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Nobody knows what you're saying. Okay. So since most people are deficient, so the next thing we're going to talk about is.
And how can an ordinary person test? We can't just test that at home, right? There's no kit. It's just got to be through a blood test.
Blood test. Yeah.
And that's like doctor's ordered blood test or whatever.
Yeah.
Is that a normal thing that they test? If you just go get your,
Nope.
They won't even test for it, eh?
No. On requisitions,
There's got to be kits. I was looking up at, because I was looking at other people that do like wellness training and coaching and all that kind of stuff, and hormone stuff for women.
Yeah.
A lot of women that coach for hormone levels or whatever.
Yeah.
And they say they just send away for like a kit.
Yep.
It's like, oh, you can do this. I don't know, ridiculous how much they cost, but
yeah, you can.
if it's doing, if there's a thing you can do to get hormones tested, isn't there a kit that you can get to get like some vitamin levels?
Like there probably is. There probably is.
Right. I don't know if that's through blood or whatever, because that's kind of crazy.
It could be saliva. In some of the studies I've read, they talked about different ways to measure and what the most accurate way is.
As long as you just get a general, kind of like those piss sticks where you'd piss on to get your ketone levels. You know, it's like just what's the relative level, right? Like, especially, you know, to know if you're deficient or not, just to have it. It would be good, I guess, because as we're going to see, this is pretty important. So anyways.
Yeah.
See if we can find something. If we find something, we'll put it in the notes, but
yeah. So now any questions about vitamin D in and of itself?
No, it sounds like it's just an important, and it's just a vitamin, which is what is it just like a combination of amino acids?
It's actually it's actually like a steroid. Actually, a lot of people do call it like a steroid hormone, and we're gonna see eventually that the one society that makes the recommendations for vitamin D is the Endocrine Society, which endocrine means hormones, the hormone system. So it is considered a steroid hormone.
Kind of like insulin?
I don't think insulin's a steroid hormone.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's
I think testosterone.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know if testosterone would be considered a steroid hormone. I don't know. I don't know.
Clearly,
I have to look that one up.
Not on the roids.
So to give a little bit of background of why this really interested me is I subscribe to 2 different newsletters. I don't subscribe to a lot of newsletters because I fucking hate newsletters and I just don't read them. However, Heather Hying.
Subscribe to our newsletter, by the way.
Heather Hying, actually, it's her Substack that I'm subscribed to, sorry, but it comes through in my email. It's her Substack called Natural Selections. She's an evolutionary biologist, and she hosts a podcast with her husband, Brett Weinstein, called the Dark Horse Podcast.
Okay, I know.
And they look at everything through an evolutionary lens, which gives a very fascinating perspective on issues. And it's amazing. It's an amazing podcast. And her Natural Selection Substack is very well written. She's an amazing, beautiful writer and very well referenced. And so she wrote a really great newsletter thing on vitamin D. I also follow another, and so Heather is PhD. I follow another researcher, PhD, Dr. Rhonda Patrick. Many people may know her from longevity research. And she's been on Rogan like a gazillion times, and she's pretty big, and she has a really good newsletter as well. She had a really great one on COVID-19 and vitamin D. So, I'm just going to read a quote from, it's one of the papers that Heather had in hers. So the quote says, although randomized control trial results may be available eventually, the correlation and causal study evidence supported a link between vitamin D deficiency and COVID-19 risks is already so strong that it supports action. So the point of this is there really hasn't, in this review that they did, it was like a preliminary review. And so there weren't many randomized controlled trial results that they were able to see, which is like they say the gold standard. But in reviewing everything, they saw that the evidence correlational and causational was so strong that it does support the action of making a recommendation to take more vitamin D to avoid these COVID-19 risks.
Even given the fact that it's vitamin D, it's like you have
Yes.
to probably take so much for it to.
And we'll talk
get into
about
that.
Yeah. So then the next part says, widely recommending 2,000 international units IUs of vitamin D daily for all populations with limited ability to manufacture vitamin D from the sun, has virtually no potential for harm and is reasonably likely to save many lives.
Right.
Yeah. So
I would like to see what the actual graphs actually look like for what they're because they're talking about finding some type of correlation, and I would like to see just how, like, what's the p-value on there? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't know what the p-value is. Maybe for people that are not statisticians, can we say what
I'm not a statistician.
P-value is? Can we say what
Well,
P-value is?
p-value I think is just a level of confidence in how well the data actually matches like a correlation, right? So like if you had a p-value of, I think it's 1 or maybe it's 0. No, if it's p-value of 1, it's like every point is on the line, right? So you have like.
Okay, but what does it mean if you are in a scientific, like this is all that what you're saying is true, but how do we apply it? So if you're looking, I think the p-value is, depending on what the p-value is, it's the likelihood that this is by chance alone, right? Do you know what I'm saying? Like what's the likelihood there's a signal here and that, it's not.
Yeah.
That's what the p-value is.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it's been a while since I've done any kind of stats, but it's some kind of measure of
confidence in your correlation or causation or whatever. Yeah. Okay. So
that's what I mean. Yeah, because if all the points are right on the line, then it's pretty clear. Like as this one goes up, this one's going to match it exactly, right? You'll be very confident in saying that
these two things are
exactly.
Yeah. So Heather pointed out in her newsletter that when she did a Google Scholar search for vitamin D deficiency and COVID, there was 11,000 search results for papers on this. Rhonda Patrick brought up like there was like over 3,000 studies finding that there is a causal relationship between vitamin D and COVID outcomes. So there's lots out there. It's not just 1 or 2 off, it's thousands.
Right.
So what's really interesting.
But are they all claiming pretty much the same thing though? That there's a correlation between deficiency in vitamin D to negative outcomes from patients that have COVID.
Yes. Heather, this is what I love about her. She goes through and she picks out a couple that are like against vitamin D and saying that we shouldn't be suggesting it. So I love that she did that because she's always looking at both sides.
You have to.
This is as a scientist what you have to do. Because
it really makes me wonder. It's like if everyone is saying that this is good, then why aren't we doing this? Even though we're talking about how to save lives here.
Yes. Yeah.
So
what I also found really interesting, I didn't know this, is that the most severe comorbidities for COVID. So comorbidity is something that
a pre-existing illness.
An illness condition that you have, yes. So if you have one of these illnesses, you are more likely to have severe COVID or have a very negative adverse COVID outcome. And so the most severe comorbidities are race, age, obesity, and kidney disease.
In that order?
I don't know. So these are also the most common conditions associated with vitamin D deficiency. So correlation doesn't mean causation, but it seems interesting. There's something there. Also, the other.
Well, race, I guess the only thing that would have to do with that would be the color of your skin and your ability to absorb vitamin D.
Yeah. So the others that were on this list, but not top 4, are depression and anxiety are actually a comorbidity for COVID, and there is actually evidence to show that vitamin D is involved in depression and anxiety, like vitamin D deficiency. So I found that interesting.
There's so many things that just crisscross here.
Yes.
I mean, if you're overweight, you have a probably better chance of being depressed because you're like, oh shit. At least for me, it's like, oh god, I'm so so can't do anything. I'm so fat. What the hell?
Well, and one thing, one thing just leads into another, right? So like type 1 and 2 diabetes is also one, and then the last one is being institutionalized, which obviously if you're inside all the time, you're not getting any vitamin D.
Yeah.
So
I saw The Joker, and being in an institution is not good.
Oh. No. So
I shouldn't say that because I mean it's there to help people. So
yeah, and so some of the quick. I won't get into the studies just because it's there's too much. But some of the studies that in Rhonda Patrick's newsletter, one from the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition says that. It was a study in the UK found that those who took vitamin D regularly were 34% less likely to develop COVID, like at all.
So they're basically like immune to it in a sense.
Not immune, but just like they're not getting it, like because their body is able to maybe fight it off.
But that's what I mean. Isn't that what it means?
That's not immunity. That doesn't mean immunity.
So what does immunity mean?
Immunity means you have antibodies that would attack specifically that invader in your body.
Okay. So, but if you have vitamin D and that invader comes in, but you don't get sick because your body's fighting it off.
That doesn't mean you have immunity.
What does it mean then?
Well, it depends on what the mechanism of action is. If you have vitamin D that has antiviral properties, that is going in and killing the virus.
Is that what's happening? I don't know.
It could be. That's the thing is we just don't know. We don't know. It could be that it's bolstering your innate immune system, but that's not creating antibodies.
All right.
So yeah, I don't know. Again, it's something.
This is the same thing. The same thing is that you get exposed to a virus and your body fights it off. And you don't get sick.
So, but immunity itself, I'm talking about taking a supplement or having a nutritional level that doesn't necessarily translate to immunity. I'm just trying.
I understand.
Trying to be precise.
I understand. I understand.
The other one, COVID-19 patients who had higher vitamin D levels were 20 times less likely to have a critical outcome, and eight times less likely to have severe outcome versus a mild one. So that's a big deal.
That sounds really big.
This one is the kicker. Among patients with COVID-19, 98.9% of those with vitamin D deficiency died. That's huge.
So, repeat that again, please.
98.9% of those COVID-19 patients with vitamin D deficiency died.
Right. So if you get, where is this study? Where are they taking all these people from?
So I can look up what study that one was.
And like how many people? 98% of what? Is it 3 people?
Just
or
let me bring it up.
So basically that's saying that if you're vitamin D deficient, it's saying that almost 100% of all the people that are vitamin D deficient died. But that's kind of crazy because that's like saying
I think how she wrote it is different. So I think the better way to say it is if people that died of COVID-19, out of people that died of COVID-19, 98.9% of them were vitamin D deficient. So not saying you're going to die if you're...
Right. It's not 98% of people that are vitamin D deficient.
That's the way she wrote it. So you're right. That was a little bit misleading. It was a little bit. Yeah, it was wrong. So it was a retrospective study. It was obviously, and it was 780 cases of laboratory confirmed infection.
Where?
In Indonesia. So, I mean, they shouldn't really, if you would think Indonesia, you wouldn't necessarily have
too much vitamin D deficiency.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it depends though, right?
Yeah. So results reveal that the majority of death cases were male and older and had pre-existing condition and below normal vitamin D serum levels. So,
how much below that? That's one of the questions that I have.
Yeah. So.
Okay.
Yep.
So about 700 out of 700 deaths they looked at.
780 cases. Yeah.
Not cases, but deaths.
Deaths. Yeah. Sorry. No, it'd be. Yes,
yeah, because they're looking at deaths. They're looking at the deaths, and then 98% of all the people that died had vitamin D deficiency, which again doesn't prove anything. It's just saying.
Yep. So,
because it could also be like, well, they're deficient, but they're only deficient because, I don't know, maybe because they're obese, and then 98% were obese. I don't know. I'm just saying that, illustrating how it could.
So they looked at. This is across the board. This is what is defined as deficient, and I don't know if this will give you an idea.
Not enough of.
But less than 20 nanograms per milliliter is considered deficient.
Yeah.
So
those numbers,
whatever it means
nothing to me whatsoever.
Yeah.
I don't even know.
So the p-value of this was less than 0.05 was considered statistically significant.
Right. So that's right. The p-value you want it to be really small. not really large. If it's really large, then it's completely random.
Yeah.
And then if it's small, if it's, that's right.
So-
0.05 I usually use the threshold
Yeah. So
for it to be statistically significant anyways.
yeah. So then the next piece of this is how is vitamin D doing this? Okay.
How's vitamin D
How
doing
is vitamin
what?
D protecting people from these bad outcomes, from mortality and from severe
Did we
outcomes?
did we establish that it's protecting people? Because we just said there's a correlation.
I think you. There's so many studies showing these associations, and like I said, there's so many, and I have links to stuff that we'll get into. But there is, like, I have one that is like this one. It's a basic review of the preliminary evidence that COVID-19 risk and severity is increased in vitamin D deficiency. So it's a big review of everything. There's another one that I have here that is going to be a chapter within a book about treatments for COVID. And it's a whole chapter on vitamin D and
So maybe the better way to say it is to say like here's the mechanisms of how COVID or how vitamin D works in the body, and then how that could be beneficial to fighting COVID.
And so we already talked about it has potential antiviral effects, which have been acknowledged that it needs to be studied more. We don't know. It looks good, but we need more studies on it.
So we don't know the mechanism as to why it would be good antiviral.
Well, we do. We have an idea, but we just need to flesh it out a bit more, I think. And I think as like a scientist, you're going to be pretty careful about making that assertion, right?
Unless it's something that's new that could be sold to people and it's on patent.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Anyways, we'll talk about that.
So the other one we talked about is immune regulation, and it has direct effects on both the innate immune system and the adaptive immune system. So you're going to do better if you have vitamin D. Your immune system is going to be better. So
so you're saying vitamin D helps your
immune system. Yeah,
right.
100%. The other one, the main one that I wanted to talk about because it is the most interesting to me, is it regulates what's called the Renin-Angiotensin System. Okay.
That means nothing to me.
So the Renin-Angiotensin System. So renin, anytime you hear renin or something like that, you're going to think about kidneys. That's usually
like renal dialysis.
You got it. So that's what you're going to think about. When you hear angio, that is...
Angio. It's like Adrian. It's like boxing. You think boxing?
No.
Well, I do.
I don't know if I can make a correlation there. I don't think I can. So angio is going to be, you're going to think about blood, and you're going to think about your blood vessels.
Why'd you call it blood then?
Well, because scientists want to be fancy and say fancy things. So we all know, so this is the Renin-Angiotensin System. So what happens is you have this one molecule called angiotensin 2. And angiotensin 2, if there's a lot of it, let's back up. Anything in your body, everything is always supposed to be on balance. So you can have molecules, for different purposes. And when they get out of balance, bad shit happens.
Yep.
So this is...
Like if you have too much sodium, then shit happens to your water gets drawn out of your blood cells and stuff like that, right?
But if you don't have enough, then
it goes the other way.
Exactly. So everything is supposed to be in balance in your body.
Yep.
So if you have too much of this angiotensin 2, it leads to tissue injury. And so what happens with angiotensin 2 is it is pro-inflammatory. So it makes all these inflammation things happening. It leads to fibrosis, which is like blood clots and that sort of thing. And it also increases oxidation, which isn't great.
So where does this angio 2 stuff come from?
Angiotensin 2. I don't exactly know which one it comes from. I have a feeling it's the adrenal gland that it's released from. That's not important to our story, right?
Okay.
Now. It's not important to our story.
All right.
I don't want to do too much. So angiotensin 2, if there's too much of it, you get tissue injury. Inflammation is the main thing you're wanting to keep in mind here. On the other side of this, angiotensin can be converted to angiotensin 1,7. And angiotensin 1-7 is kind of like the opposite side of the coin. So when you have that, you're going to have decreased inflammation, you're going to have decreased fibrosis, and you're going to have decreased oxidation. So what happens is you're wondering, well, how does angiotensin 2 get converted to angiotensin 1-7?
Vitamin D. No?
Yes. But no. But sort of.
Okay, that's interesting.
Vitamin D is not coming into the story just yet.
All right.
So
I'm interested to see where the story is going.
So
here.
we have our cell, okay? And on my cell, I have the ACE2 receptor.
Right, yep.
Everyone is aware what the ACE2 receptor does.
I don't think everyone is aware of this.
People.
Nobody knows what this is.
This is where the coronavirus comes in and it binds to this ACE2 receptor, and then it goes into the cell and makes that cell its a little virus factory.
Yep.
Okay. So one thing you have to remember is when coronavirus binds to this ACE2, that ACE2 comes back into the cell. It's gone. So that's important to remember. So what happens is if that coronavirus binds and it takes that ACE2 receptor, angiotensin 2 has nowhere to bind. So you're going to get a buildup of that angiotensin 2. If there's if the coronavirus is taking up the space, and then it's removing that receptor.
Yeah. So basically, angiotensin 2, it binds to the same receptacle in a cell that
receptor, yes,
that coronavirus does, and that's what that angiotensin 2 is used in the cell for, whatever process that your body needs.
Yeah. Well, angiotensin 2, it's used for regulating blood pressure and fluid balance, because that's what happens in your kidneys, right? When your kidneys need to they recognize whether there's too much salt, right? And so then it goes through this whole Renin-Angiotensin system, right? And so that's what angiotensin 2 is doing. The whole process is to regulate the blood pressure and the fluid balance, which are both connected.
Right.
So anyway, where vitamin D comes in here is vitamin D actually increases the expression of those ACE2 receptors on the cell. So if you have the coronavirus coming in and taking out one of those receptors, it's okay if you have lots of vitamin D, because vitamin D is like, yeah, screw you.
There's 5 more or whatever.
Yeah, there's 5 more. So we're not going to have an issue here.
That's what vitamin D does.
One of the many things it does.
So question, how many ACE2 receptors does a cell have?
I don't know. That's a really good question, and I don't know. And I think it would really depend on what type of cell it is, because there's ACE2 throughout our bodies, not just in our lungs. It's all over the place.
Like every cell?
I don't know I don't think it's every
specific
cell,
types of cells.
But it's in many different cells, and this is why you're seeing many different symptoms of COVID, because
it
ACE2
affects in different places. Yeah. But mostly it's cardiovascular diseases or pulmonary disease, isn't it?
Well, what's interesting is I did a little bit of digging, and a lot of people are more talking about COVID in terms of it being a vascular disease.
Right, that's the word.
Yeah. So that's really interesting, I think. But that's the whole point is, so not only does vitamin D increase this ACE2 expression, but it actually inhibits one of the enzymes that, or maybe one of the hormones that is involved in changing one form of angiotensin into angiotensin 2. So it's kind of like a double dose of things. So that's a double dose of pimpage. So it's obviously it's really important. So in that, and that's like the main COVID story, right? Of how it gets into your body.
Okay. So this doesn't, I don't still understand how that helps with being an effective tool for COVID, because a COVID will still bind. Yes, it's just making more. So it's like, maybe it's more susceptible to COVID because now there's more sites for COVID to attach to.
Okay. Yes. But what happens is that because you're already having an immune response to the virus, and then if you then you're also having this angiotensin 2 buildup that's increasing this inflammation. And what happens is then you get this cytokine storm, which is this humongous, and this is what people are dying from, is this over immune reaction. And so you get this huge cytokine storm, which damages tissues, which can lead to fluid buildup in your lungs, which is not good.
So inflammation can on its own can even cause this what is that? What is that?
So it's really hard. Like I tried to look it up and it's really nebulous and there isn't really any kind of like agreed on definition of what it is. So cytokines are like inflammatory molecules.
Response. They respond to inflammation.
Well, no, they create inflammation. Yeah, they're part of the inflammation cascade. Again, I don't want to get too into it because it can get really, really confusing. Even like I was confused, and I probably am not saying a lot of this right. And people that are listening maybe are screaming at me for not doing it right. The point is you get this inflammation response, and inflammation causes damage. Many of the diseases, chronic diseases,
caused by inflammation. My back, as an example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's not it's good acutely to
solve a problem,
to cure a cut or something like that. But over time, it's all bad news. Or if it's an intense reaction like this big storm all at once, it's not great.
Right.
Yeah. And so, So that's one of the things. And so another a thing that people are kind of like dying from is this acute respiratory distress syndrome. People may have heard of it, called like, they call it like ARDS. But the main reason is because there's this greater conversion of this angiotensin 2 into angiotensin 1-7. So that's kind of the point of it, is to get rid of that angiotensin pro-inflammatory.
Get rid of the 2.
The 2, yeah.
And vitamin D does that how?
By upregulating the ACE2 receptors, so that you have more ACE2 receptors to bind to that.
So like, for example, if a cell usually has, say, 3 ACE2 receptors, and now it has 6, so then you can double the amount of
angiotensin
whatever
2
can go in and get converted into.
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah. So that is like a really short.
And that just helps your body not go crazy when it's trying to fight COVID.
Yeah. Yeah. Not add to the inflammation issue.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which kind of creates this perfect storm of lots of things, double damaging, triple damaging.
Exactly.
Or what have you.
Exactly.
So that's why I guess you're saying that you just need to be off more research to see exactly how this thing's actually working and what the mechanisms are in place and how it could potentially be used in a clinical way, I guess, therapeutic way, exactly.
Yeah.
For treatment.
Yeah. So what we can take away from this is we can talk about what the recommendations.
Bitch, go outside and get some vitamin D.
So what we can do is we can talk about what the current recommendations are and why they might not be enough, and different toxicity concerns, because it is a fat-soluble vitamin. So current recommendations, and we can talk about why vitamin recommendations are not great, and we need to probably do a whole revamp of every single vitamin recommendation, because they have only been tested on like a small sample size of people, and it's not a one-size-fits-all deal. So
are you kidding? Everything's a one-size-fits-all deal. Isn't that what healthcare is nowadays?
No. What was I going to say?
Talk about revamping the whole.
Yeah, because they're on like healthy people, and it's usually, it's healthy men. Like, women are not often in this picture, unfortunately.
Well, there's a good reason for that.
So, some recommendations, if you look, they're like 200 to 400 IUs. And IU is just like international units. That's just what they use. I don't know. It's just how they're measuring. What the hell?
Because you gave me the number of 40 micrograms per whatever of whatever.
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
Yeah. I'm sorry. My computer keeps
resetting it?
No, it just keeps like
what do you need it for?
Timing out. Well, because I'm going to be looking at a couple papers. So, like I said before, the deficiency is defined as like 20 nanograms per milliliter, and the sweet spot seems to be 50 nanograms per milliliter.
So what you want to have floating around your body.
Yeah. And so, like I had said, there is this paper that is in, I think it's the Journal of Nutrients, and it says, the title is COVID-19 mortality risk correlates inversely with vitamin D status. And a mortality rate close to 0 could theoretically be achieved at 50 nanograms per mil of D3. And then it says results of a systematic review and meta-analysis. So,
well, that sounds like a interesting paper.
Yeah.
So, like, the way I look at that, it's like vitamin D is obviously you need it anyways. It's good. It's a vitamin. You need it, I guess. So it's like this is a pretty harmless thing to do anyways, even if you think that these scientists or this is whatever, right? Because maybe it is bullshit. Who knows? I don't know.
Yeah.
But is there any harm? I don't know if that's the greatest way to think about things in life. It's like, well, is there any harm? I'll just do it anyways. But
we'll get to that in a moment. But even like, so the Endocrine Society, like I was saying, their recommendations are 4,000 IUs for an adult per day.
4,000 IUs. This is when you actually take it within like an actual, like a supplement store,
yeah,
right?
Because that's how it's measured out. And yeah.
What does that correlate to time outside?
I don't know. I have no idea. So, but that's what they're suggesting. They even say like you could even take, and this is the endocrine system or endocrine society. So they're saying you could even take like 10,000 IUs and you would be fine
On a daily basis?
Yeah, for like 2 to 3 weeks. So if you're like severely deficient, you could take 10,000 IUs for 2 to 3 weeks and then hopefully get your levels up quickly and then go back down to like 4,000 a day.
Well,
you'd be fine.
Yeah. And this is where my questions come into play. It's like, how can I take this information and apply it? It's like, well, what do I get when I'm outside? And like, what's the difference between the regular vitamin D that my body would make versus what's coming out in these drops or whatever, or these capsules or these supplements? Are they different? Are they in a slightly different form? Because I know lots of vitamins, they come in different forms. I just have so many questions.
Well, we can talk about that too, because the other thing is like, let's talk about toxicity. So the main issues with toxicity have been calcium. And so if you're taking a D3 plus calcium, I mean, I'm not a doctor. Take whatever I say with a grain of salt, and it's not prescriptive. Nothing I'm saying is prescriptive, but there could be problems with calcium if you're taking a D3 with calcium.
Okay, but that's totally different though. That's not about, we're talking about. But so you're saying that they, like oftentimes if you go to the vitamin store, you want to get a vitamin D supplement. You're saying it's just infused with calcium, so it's like calcium plus vitamin D in like one pill.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's fair enough. So then you're saying people aren't really actually ODing or having issues because they're taking too much vitamin D. They're taking it because they have too much calcium because of those calcium pills.
Sorry, say it again.
So you're saying that people that take vitamin D supplements with calcium, they're saying they have problems because they have too much calcium, not because they have too much vitamin D.
Could be, yes. I think that's how it is. I think the point is because D and calcium are interrelated. There could the times that they've had toxicity issues, it's been when people have taken calcium with vitamin D. That's the point I'm trying to get across.
All right.
If people are worried about toxicity, then that's something to research more.
So then, what about people that just take vitamin D?
Yeah. So then the only other issues that they've seen with toxicity have been like because there's been impurities or manufacturing issues with the supplement itself, not the vitamin D.
So has anybody overdosed on vitamin D?
In anything I've read, I have not heard of it. So, and even there was a really interesting anecdote that...
Has anybody ever overdosed on any of these like over-the-counter supplements? Like you hear about this.
Yeah.
Like what are the... Oh, sorry, finish. You were saying something like an anecdote.
Go ahead.
Well, my question is what are the side effects of having too much vitamin D? You said it's like, 20 micrograms or whatever it is. What if I was at 2,000 or 200? Like I was 10 times over what my body should kind of have. How am I going to see that manifest itself?
Yeah, I don't.
Am I going to have headaches? I'm going to be dizzy. I'm going to throw up. Loss of appetite.
I don't know.
My hair's going to fall out.
I don't know. Like I'd have to look that up. There was a really interesting anecdote that I read, and it was about because oftentimes you'll see milk that is like fortified with vitamin D, because again, you have milk and calcium, and this is cow's milk. And so there was one anecdote.
Cow's milk, man.
I know. There was this one anecdote about this. I don't know who it was. They were processing the milk and they put in like way too much. The calculations were off and they put way too much. And so like a lot too much. Like I can't find it. But like it was fine. People were fine. There was no issues. Like I think there was one issue, but again, it wasn't because of the vitamin D. There was something else going on with it. So I think it's really difficult. And I'm not sure. Yeah. You'd have to look up like what the vitamin D toxicity looks like.
What like the LD50 is, if there even is one.
Yeah. So, and I mean, I'm sure there is.
Oh, there is. There's an LD50 for like water, you know. There's so much you can have, but it's a lot.
Yeah. So then just the one quote that I wanted to say here was, given that vitamin D is a safe, inexpensive, and I mean, it's inexpensive because like how much is it that we buy? We buy the liquid stuff.
Yeah, we buy the liquid stuff. That's every 1 milliliter, I think or 1 drop. No, 1 milliliter is 1,000 IUs, and there's 25 milliliters in there. So that'd give you like 25,000 IOUs. So you get that many IOU units, and it's like $6. Yeah, maybe $5. $6. Yeah, let's call it 7. Okay. Okay. I guess it depends on if it's on sale or not, or whatever. That's true. So it's not like it's that much. I mean, it's not, I don't know how many squirts to get off of that thing, but
that's what she said.
All right. My goodness.
So given that vitamin D is a safe, inexpensive, and widely available agent, even in countries with limited resources, a vitamin D inadequacy is obviously an easily modifiable risk factor. Therefore, from the literature reviewed here, prevention and/or restoration of vitamin D deficiency/inefficiency through supplementation during the COVID-19 period seems to be highly supported by the evidence. And so this is from Unraveling the Roles of Vitamin D Status and Melanin During COVID-19, a review, and that was from the International Journal of Molecular Medicine. So again, not a guy wearing a tinfoil hat.
Yeah,
it's like legit science.
Well, it's tough.
You hope
it's tough though, because you say that it's like but Dr. Fauci is a guy that has all these credentials too, right? So it's like, but I hear that guy and I'm like, there's this riddled with. I mean, the problem. I don't think he's stupid or anything like that. I just think he's just so riddled with conflicts of interest that nothing that comes out of that guy's mouth is just the truth, because there's just too much. So it's just filled with politics at that stage, right? So he knows what's going on. It's just. It's just politics there. So, but that's also just because it's I got a PhD. Doesn't mean you could trust them. Mm-hmm. Spent a lot of time around people with PhDs, and they're not all good. People are people, right? Like, listen, like, think about you and what job you might have, and you've been doing that job for like 10 years. Yeah. That is equivalent, even more so, than having a PhD. A PhD is doing something for 4 years and just like reading books on a topic. Yeah. And doing some experiments or whatever. So if you've been fixing cars for 10 years, you have a PhD and way then some in terms of mechanics, right? Does that mean everything that comes out of your mouth is solid gold, Mm-hmm. Especially on something that you're not fluent in? I guess a good thing would be like, oh, you have a PhD in car mechanic, but then like my airplane breaks down. Yeah. And, you might kind of have an idea of how like the engine works, but you're not qualified to tell me exactly how to fix it. So that's why you have doctors now that are just like, I'm a doctor of, I don't know, what's a good example? A doctor that's, like a surgeon or whatever. And then or like a brain surgeon, but yet, he's advising on how to like,
well, I mean, maybe
like liver surgery. I don't know, right?
You could even make like a veterinarian kind of comparison.
Sure.
I don't know. I don't know where you're going.
I'm just saying there's so many different types of doctors, like doctors 100%. That have no idea about virology, but yet all of a sudden now they're the experts on knowing exactly the mechanisms of how everything works. It's like, no, you didn't even study that stuff. Yeah. You studied stuff in general, just like I read those. I studied the same shit that you did. Yeah. The same school as you, asshole. But you know what I mean? So
yeah.
anyways, whatever.
So
I don't need, there's no point in that.
To wrap up the vitamin D story specifically. So what we're seeing is that people that have bad outcomes, whether it's severe COVID or whether it's death, typically 98.8%. And that's just one study. To be honest, that's just one study, but I've seen that number quoted multiple times for multiple different studies. I have. So it's not out of the realm, right? It's been replicated. The point is there's a signal there that we need to be paying attention to.
That's what I said. Marker.
So marker and signals are different.
Whatever.
So number 2 is we know it's important within the main system that's happening, the main receptor that COVID is attaching to. So number 2, we know that. So we know that obviously this could be one of the reasons why it's directly related to that ACE2 receptor. And then the last thing is so because it's really hard to have toxicity, and it's cheap and it's widely available, it should be something you should be looking into to take to protect yourself, especially if you are in one of those risk groups. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's funny because you get these drugs drugs just mimic, like they just kind of like mimic hormones and different things that happen inside your body. Some of them do anyways.
Yeah.
So there's, it's interesting to think about it. It's how I like the idea of trying to fight a virus or something that comes in by trying to disrupt the actual mechanism of how it like actually duplicates or replicates itself.
Yeah.
So this is really cool. And I guess this one in a way doesn't do that at all because it still allows for the binding of the virus to the cell. Mm-hmm. But what I like about drugs, I mean, the new one that just came out from Pfizer, I don't even know what it's called. The ivermectin twin or whatever. Do you know what it's called? I can't remember what it's called. I saw the molecular structure. Anyways, so there's that. And then there's ivermectin, which what it does is you take this drug and it takes the enzyme that unravels the actual protein within the virus, and then
the protein or the RNA.
That's a good question. I think it's just it's protein. It's the protein. So I think with coronavirus, when it gets into the cell, it like unravels and it needs to be cut so that it can go off and do its thing.
Okay.
So, but what this does is that it inhibits the protein that actually goes ahead and cuts that.
Okay.
So is it a protein that does the protein or the
enzyme?
Yeah, maybe it's an enzyme, whatever. There's something in the body that cuts the protein of the virus to help it replicate or whatever. So it stops that. So that's what this new Pfizer drug does. So, but anyway, so I'd like that because it's not as dangerous in terms of like
stimulating your immune system.
Yeah. Or like as a vaccine, right? Which isn't about stopping the actual process. So, but I guess the reason why I'm saying this is it would be really cool if there was some type of vitamin or whatever, like you said, a hormone or amino acid, I don't know, whatever, that would somehow restrict the binding of other things to an ACE2 receptor, whatever. That would be really cool. Really so then it'd be like a more natural way of stopping things without having to do anything crazy because I think like any kind of vaccine or whatever is kind of crazy.
Well, kind of related to this, I had my mind blown today. So I've heard of the CRISPR technology. I don't know if you've heard about it. It has
something to do with CRISPR, like a toast?
No, it blew my mind. So it's about gene editing. And so, because this is how smart our kids are, just so you know. We have a grade 8 and a grade 10, and we're learning about genetic engineering. This is how smart these kids are. So we're talking about CRISPR.
Tell me when they clone something, then we'll talk.
Okay,
then I'll be impressed.
Okay. So CRISPR is this like thing, and I'm not going to explain it well because I need to do way more research because I don't understand it at all. But what's really cool is bacteria and viruses are at war all the time. Like viruses are constantly infecting.
It's like life. Bacteria. Everything's always in competition.
So bacteria has created.
Viruses are infecting bacteria.
All the time. Yeah, all the time. They kill, I think it's like a crazy amount of bacteria, like all the time.
Viruses do?
Oh yeah, it's like insane. And so.
Just like out in nature, not necessarily in your body?
You could, I heard this somewhere, you could go and get like a liter of ocean water and there's so many viruses in there.
Probably.
It's unreal. Anyway, so because.
And bacteria.
Yeah. But
especially since I poop in there.
that's gross.
Well, whatever.
I don't want to go swimming with you anymore.
It's a big ocean. Not big enough.
You go over there. How about you go all the way over to the Pacific Ocean?
I would, because then it would actually be warm, not this freezing Atlantic garbage.
Anyways, so bacteria, because they've been like evolving, right, with these viruses for so long, they've created what is called, so CRISPR is an acronym, and I'm not even going to remember it. So they've created this thing where if a virus infects them, they're able to cut I'm going to say it wrong, but they're able to kind of cut a portion of the virus's DNA, and they give it to this other little protein called Cas9. And so Cas9 is kind of like holding up a sign at the airport almost, with this DNA or RNA sequence on it. And so they are holding it up. And so like whenever the virus RNA comes in, they bind to it and then like destroy it.
Yeah.
So, but there's way more to it, but we're using it because it's it's the cutting thing. That's what they're looking for. That's what I was kind of
talking about. Yeah.
And so they're able to cut out these very particular,
it's like Mortal Kombat doing the finishing move and just go in there, grab the heart and then pull it out. It's like boom, surgical.
It's so surgical. It's so accurate. And they're even getting it down to be able to cut just like a single base pair, which is blew my mind. Like I said, I have to do way more research. There's a book actually about the woman that discovered it that I started reading, but I didn't have time. But anyways, I have to get back on that one because it blew my mind.
This is the thing with like technology and the stuff that we're eventually going to be able to do, because just like the human body, it's the same thing like a computer or whatever. It's just at the end of the day, it's just like even the brain is just a bunch of nerves going ones and zeros on or off kind of thing. And like everything is so, it's just based on that. So you break it down to the smallest components. And then once you understand things, you can just create other things to do whatever it is that you want. So it's
like I said to the kids, because they wanted to get to this genetic engineering part in our unit. And I was like, guys, like we have to learn the rules before we can play, right? Yeah. Like we have to learn how the bases pair up, how proteins are synthesized, and then we can play with it, right?
Or you can even maybe tease about whatever. This is what we're going to learn. Let's gotta learn the basics first to be able to get there.
Well, that's exactly it.
Like for me in technology, like I know like this whole thing of singularity is kind of the thing where it's just complete merge of humans and technology, and you will be like indistinguishable. To me, I think it's basically inevitable. And that point, like, I mean, I don't see any reason why we'll get to the point where we'll never get sick, never die. You could live forever.
That's what they were talking about with this CRISPR technology. It's going to happen. Oh yeah, you know? I have no doubt. It's so fascinating.
And like all diseases and stuff could be eradicated. You know, because I mean, every human that already has the ability anyways to be able to fight off diseases. Yeah. So if you can amplify that and figure out how to do it so that it always works and for everybody, you know what I mean? Because everyone's off, some people their immune system are not as good as others, but that is more of a fault of our faulty way of creating the human body or whatever. Right. So I don't know. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Right. So
no, it's the most fascinating thing. That video was really, really cool today. So I have to read that book.
So we'll wait for that cure. But that's the thing. It's like, I'm going to take that shit, because it's like the first steps and that stuff is like,
you don't
embedding, Elon Musk's little chip in your brain and stuff like that, right? That's you know, or take some kind of pills that has like nanoparticles going in there, right? I mean, so like nano robots, even not even just particles, but actual.
Yeah, well, even like learning
machines.
about like, you know, the first people with that were doing organ transplants. Those first people, it's like it doesn't matter, they're going to die anyway, so they might as well. Like a lot of them said,
right,
you might as well like study me and practice on me so that other people,
it'll help humanity.
Exactly.
Right.
So that, and if you're just going to die anyways, right? You might as well. So,
or at least you're going to die anyway. So maybe this will be a chance that you could live.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You don't, it's a win-win almost, or lose-lose.
No, it's not. It's like the opposite of win-win.
Lose.
It's like you're lose-lose, but win for everyone else, I guess. Thank you for your service, sir. Ma'am.
So let's bring this all the way back to talking about personal responsibility.
Yeah, sure.
So I think the main takeaways today are we can't control ever what's going to happen in terms of pandemics. And I hate to just say this, but probably like we're really lucky with COVID because it could have been a lot worse. The virus, everything that happened was awful, but what the virus could have been 1 million times worse. Like, I don't even want to think about an Ebola pandemic or
yeah, but you know what though? I feel like if it was something that was more serious, I think everybody would be on the right page. And there would be no bullshit politics being played. It'd be like, we just have to fucking figure this shit out.
Yeah,
like, listen, like literally 30% are dying from this. Like, we need to, they'd be like,
you're right.
Oh, do I need to wear a mask? Or the fuck, man, the guys are bleeding through their eyes down the street. You know what I mean?
Hazmat.
Like, yeah, it's like, there'd be no debate. It'd be like, well, should we take this ivermectin stuff? Well, it's like, no. I don't know. You know what I mean? I just feel like if it was that serious, it'd be like, okay, well.
No, it's true.
But maybe not though. Maybe there still will always be politics. I have no idea.
I don't know.
There's politics seems to be in everything.
I think,
right?
but I think
I wouldn't be going out there being like, well, fuck it. I'm just going to not do it. Or I don't know.
I think the point is you can't control those things. You can't control if you're going to get something like cancer.
Right.
So the only thing you can control is what you do with your body, what you put in your body, and how you move it,
and try to take care of it to the best of your ability.
So take care of it by not eating shit and by moving it every day.
And I guess drinking copious amounts of IOUs for vitamin D.
Well, not copious. Let's we don't want anyone to die from.
Well, that's what I asked you. Can you die from this stuff?
I don't know.
Because we were saying it
know.
bioaccumulates, but like
I don't know.
They're saying like that you only have to go out in the sun for 30 minutes. Once every 3 days, but I'm like, well, if I'm outside for 8 hours, am I going to OD from vitamin D?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
I think the supplement is obviously going to be different, and how it's made and how it's processed in your body is going to be different.
Well, then that's another good question. Then is that if it's processed and it's different, if it's in a different form, then is it going to react to your ACE2 receptors in the same way that your regular produced vitamin D is going to?
Yes, because it's not vitamin D at that point when it's reacting with your ACE2 receptors. It's whatever metabolite that it's made.
But that's what I'm saying. Yeah. Would that metabolite still happen with this, with that form of vitamin D?
Yes.
Whatever. Fair enough.
So anyways, the point is you can take control of your own health. That is something you can take control of. That is within your circle of influence.
Right.
The other thing is you can't control what the narrative is. You can't control what the government is saying, and I don't necessarily think you can trust what the government or the media is saying. So you have to educate yourself, and whether that's finding people who have credentials, who have experience, who don't have ulterior motives.
Yeah, that's tough. Everyone's
difficult.
biased, though.
It's difficult to do, but I have found a few people. But I think educating yourself is something that's important, and looking at both sides, even if you don't agree with it. That's more. Well, this is what
I would say is more important. I think what's more important than looking at people with credentials, to be honest, would be looking at what are the different sides of the argument.
That's fair.
Look at the general sides, and then read up on read up on scientific studies that are suggesting things on both sides.
Yeah.
And then make decisions. You can talk to people because, again, one individual person, like the credibility on that is not very high because it's just one person with their own opinions and biases or what have you. And that's where I think people can fall into danger. Like, well, this person said that and this person's trustworthy. So that is that. That
is a fair thing to say. I guess maybe a better way to say it is to be curious.
Yeah.
And being curious is that what they call you, Whiskers?
Just call me Whiskers. Curious like a cat. I can't even remember how it goes. It's hilarious though.
So I think maybe that's a better way, is be curious and be open. Yeah.
Be curious and always be open to learn new things and to have your opinion changed.
Yeah.
Because that's how you grow as a person. It's the only way.
Yeah.
But this, I don't know, stuff like this it's very difficult because it's also like you don't even know who to trust because you're getting so many different information from different places. You have, and the media, it feels like it's only two sides. You got the liberal side and then you have like the conservative side, and you're like, and I'm just like, both you fucking guys are idiots, and you're all like, you're just yelling same shit back and forth at each other, both playing politics, and it's just like, oh my God, where's the truth in all this? And it's hard to fish out.
It's hard, and I guess that's why be curious is important. And the vitamin D, like if you're concerned about taking too much, like then talk to your doctor about it.
Don't talk to us.
Like I said, nothing we're saying
you need to take.
Nothing we're saying is prescriptive. I will say that.
I don't think we just say that. It's like, obviously, you're not coming to us to.
No, for medical advice. I take vitamin D and I give the kids vitamin D. So that's what I'll say is that's out of all of this.
Just lay out in the sun.
Yeah.
If you overdose from too much sun, that's not my fault. Ain't my problem. So what did the guy OD from? Too much sun.
Yeah.
And heroin. That didn't help either. You OD'd from that. But we're gonna call it a vitamin D dose overdose.
Overdose.
Yeah, that's how it goes.
So
that's how I roll, anyways.
So that's what I wanted to get across today, and maybe think about why we're not hearing this in the news. Just put that little.
Well, again, it's all speculation. I don't
want to get into it, but I
need to go there.
I just wanted.
You have your own reason. Yeah. Good. Well, I mean, if what you said is valid, the idea is, it's looking like the scientific and medical community has strong evidence to support that there is a correlation between having good vitamin D levels and being protected against having significant adverse effects from COVID.
Yeah.
And because of that, it should at least be recommended, given the fact that vitamin D is so inherently safe in terms of taking it, it should be recommended that people are supplemented with it to make sure that they're boosted.
Yeah.
So at least to just recommend. So it's not saying that it's a cure. It's not saying whatever, but it's just saying like maybe it should be recommended that people just start taking vitamin D supplements.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's not. I haven't heard that anywhere ever at all.
No.
So why not? That's a good question.
Yep.
Then there's two answers. Well, there's two things I could say.
We don't have to speculate. Like I just wanted to put that question out there because no one's asking that question.
Right. Well, I'll say like, okay, well, number one, this stuff that we're reading is just false and that's wrong. That could be an option. It could be like, well, we're not talking about it because it's just a fringe group of scientists just trying to, it's possible, right? We're talking about,
okay.
Or it could be that like, well, then it could be, well, if we have all these different treatments for COVID and it ends up working, then it's very hard for the government to justify having emergency use authorization for a new drug.
Yep.
So that would be a reason to not say it. And why? Well, because there's billions, trillions of dollars even. I don't know how much is on the table for people pushing vaccines. A lot of money.
So I heard it was 60 billion that was going to be made this year.
That's just from one company making 60 billion. So like how many different, there's 10, 12 different. I don't know. Vaccine manufacturers, right? So there's a lot of billions of dollars at stake. So is there a conflict there? What do people in history have done for money? There's been times when you could look back. I mean, some people murder other people on the streets for Nike shoes, for crying out loud. That's like a couple $100.
Yeah. Yep.
Is it likely that a company is going to say the hell with all this kind of stuff and try to suppress information so that they can make $60 billion? I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible? So those are two ends of the extremes of what could possibly be happening. Yeah. I'm sure there's other different things. Maybe let us know what you think it could be a reason.
Yeah. Because, I think for me, like this one really bothered me because it's a vitamin that's necessary for life. Like we just have to have it. And most people are deficient in it anyways. And why aren't we talking about it? So I think that's bottom line. That's what really got me fired up about it.
It's pretty
and
bothersome.
why I wanted to talk about it today. And especially because it is something that you can take control of and that you can take personal responsibility for in your life. And that's always number one important thing. Is taking personal responsibility.
Yeah, for sure.
So
for sure. Don't wait for anybody else to tell you. Just do it yourself.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, who really cares about you, yourself and the people that you love and the people that are around you. So, don't worry about what governments or whatever are saying.
Nope. do what you need to do for yourself.
Exactly.
And your family.
And what I need to do is get me some IOUs.
It's not.
I'm going to go take some. That's all I'm calling that from now on.
It's not IOUs. No one's going to know.
How many? I need 20,000 IOUs, please.
Don't talk about OD.
But you're not. Like, you can't even tell me how much you need.
I know.
Like, again.
I didn't look up that information and I should have.
I don't. Yeah. Look, type in right now. Type in LD50 for vitamin D. See if you have anything. See if anything comes up.
There's an LD50 for everything, though. There's an LD50 for water.
That's what I'm saying. Well, that's what I said. I don't know what it is. I can't remember.
Well, the first thing that came up was LD50 for caffeine.
Well, what is it?
I don't know. It's hypervitaminosis.
Yeah, I'd like to know what the symptoms are.
It says over 100 nanograms per milliliter, but
anything over 100? Well, I need a specific number. It's like, if you're over, like, what does that mean?
Or more, yeah.
Or
I don't
more?
know.
That's the LD50, or that's just saying until
100
you
or more in a clinical setting.
But that just means you get to this hyper. So that doesn't even mean you're going to die. It just means you're going to get, because that's only 5 times the amount.
Yeah, so can lead to high blood concentrations of calcium.
Right, because you're saying something that it does something about regulating your calcium and getting to the bones.
Yeah,
so that's probably what you're saying, is that if you have too much vitamin D, it's creating so much excess calcium that your bones can't absorb fast enough or whatever. So then you have this calcium buildup.
It causes over-calcification of the bones, soft tissue, heart, and kidneys.
Right, because there's too much calcium that gets deposited, and then it's just too much.
And then you can get hypertension, so high blood pressure. So
is that because your capillaries are going to be shrinking because of all the buildup of stuff?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Because high blood pressure is usually due with
it shrinks.
It shrinks, so it's the diameter of your blood vessels or arteries. I don't know.
Yeah, it can be, or it can be the concentration of salt in your blood, or like solutes in your blood as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So those are the warning signs. Well, what are they say? What's the the symptoms?
Dehydration, vomiting, diarrhea. This is just like a day in your life. Just describing a typical Wednesday for you.
First of all, what are you talking about? I don't have diarrhea every Wednesday. How dare you? How dare you? I'm offended.
Decreased appetite, irritability, constipation.
What?
I love
constipation. I know you could be constipation and you could have diarrhea.
Fatigue, muscle weakness, and that's it. It can appear several months after excessive doses of D are administered. And in almost every case, a low calcium diet combined with corticosteroid drugs will allow for a full recovery within a month. So.
And like who diagnosed?
I don't think, yeah.
It's like you go into the doctor, I have diarrhea. Well, let's take a vitamin D test, shall we? To see if that's the cause.
Yeah. And the main vitamin actually that you need to worry about with toxicity is vitamin A. That one can be really toxic if you have too much.
That's the one that Bugs Bunny always has to have good eye vision.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, like here, this is just the Wikipedia, but it's saying the U.S. National Academy of Medicine established a tolerable upper intake level to protect against vitamin D toxicity. And so the upper level they're saying for people 9 years plus is 4,000. So that's that's what they're saying.
Sorry, 4,000 what?
IUs.
4,000 IOUs a day?
Yep, that's what they're saying. So
to make sure that you're not.
That you don't go toxic. Yeah.
You don't go toxic. You go full toxic.
Yeah, but that's just saying like a daily level to take is safe based on risk assessment is safe. Upper intake level of 10,000 IUs per day has been suggested sometimes as well.
Yeah, so that's a huge range. That's like a whole bottle. Jesus.
Yeah.
So many IOUs.
Yeah.
So can you look up one other thing here before we go? Because this is another question I had since the handy internet is here.
Internet.
What was the question? The question is, yes, how many transfer IOUs to like minutes in the sun? That's what I want to know, right? Type that in exactly as I said it.
Just hold on a second. I didn't know vitamin D is also used as a rodenticide. Rats and mice that consume the bait develop vitamin D overdose and die from hypercalcemia, which is too much calcium.
After I'm going to kill you, rat, in 8 months.
Strengths used in acute baits are 3 million IUs per gram. That's insane. Death happens several days after a single
So of course.
It's not
I'm going to make you suffer.
You son of a
You ever know what it's
bitch.
like to your bones to just grow old? I'm going to make this painful for you.
How do I?
As long as it doesn't die in your basement and then maggots come in and have your house infested with flies. Remember the bird?
I had a dream about that last night.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Always bad. Always
Really? Last
really
night?
bad. Yeah.
That's weird. I just brought it up now.
Yeah, that's weird.
So just a quick story while Andrew's looking that up. There was one time.
No, I don't want to talk about it.
I don't know. What was
I
it
already
like?
have it up. No, we're not talking about it right now.
Oh, well, I'm
Okay.
going to say it. You can't not say the story now. Let me just say the story.
Go quick.
So this was back when we were in Waterloo.
Throw up.
We ended up hearing this noise in the basement when I was working there in the basement, and then ended up being a bird that went in through one of the, I think it was the dryer vent, and then it was nested inside the wall, and it got into the basement, which had unfinished ceiling. Anyways, so it happened, and I tried to get it out for like 2 days, and then it ended up going underneath the floor, so it got stuck there, and then we just couldn't get it out. So then it ended up dying somewhere, we guess. And then like a month later, a couple weeks later, whatever, all of a sudden there's like extra flies in the house. There's usually flies in the house
Summertime.
in summertime.
Kids leave shit open.
Yeah, the windows and whatever, the patio was always open. So it was like, oh, that's weird. And then the next day there was like so many flies. And like, we're talking like dozens and dozens, maybe even hundreds of flies. But they were all really lethargic.
And they were
like these big flies. And so they were so lethargic that I took the vacuum and I had to vacuum them all up for like probably a good week.
I did
just
too.
Constantly.
It was
because there was just so many flies.
I don't want to talk about
So then as we were moving, so we had to clear out everything from the basement, and we moved, and then I found like just empty feathers of like this dead carcass of a bird. So like some flies put it. Anyways,
it was like a horror movie. It was like something you would see in a
like all the flies
fucking horror
but they
movie.
weren't like swarming around like killing you, because like I said, they're really lethargic because they
gross.
probably got out, they just didn't have any food, or I don't know what
I
flies
think they probably
need.
had too much food. And that's why they're so dopey. So
Anyways,
disgusting.
I don't know why we brought that up.
Anyways, so the first thing is it's talking about different skin types, because obviously if you have a specific type of skin, you're going to have a different amount. So they're saying someone with a Fitzpatrick skin type 3. So the 6 Fitzpatrick skin types classify sensitivity to ultraviolet.
Wow. Slow down there, Chief.
So type 3 is darker white skin that burns and tans. So if you have that skin type, you would require 6 minutes to synthesize 1,000 IUs of vitamin D in the summer and 15 minutes in the winter. So
How much skin is exposed?
I don't know.
Oh my God, these guys, you would just need to be out for 8 minutes. Like what? Like there's a big difference
Naked.
if you're naked or if you're like completely bundled up, right? And
Yeah.
like
So,
because it's just the surface of your skin, right?
Yeah.
Like anywhere? Is there just specific parts of your body that create this vitamin D?
no, hold on. Okay. No. I thought it said no. I can't read this whole article. This is just the abstract. Fuck. The title on this: Now is the winter of our vitamin D discontent.
What?
Yeah, it says how much sunlight is equivalent to vitamin D supplementation, and it says now is the winter of our vitamin D discontent.
I guess.
That's hilarious. It says, yeah, so one of the things they were saying, after 2 p.m. in the winter in Boston, it is impossible for even someone with Fitzpatrick type 1, so super fair skin to
Just Whitey McWhiterson. Just call it that.
see through, to receive enough sun to equal even 400 IUs of vitamin D. So
After 2 p.m.
Yeah.
So even they're outside naked.
yeah,
But in the wintertime.
yeah. So
Which is why you're outside naked in the wintertime at 2 p.m. Come on, Johnny. What's wrong with you? Or Fitzpatrick?
Fitzpatrick, yeah.
All right. So, but in the summertime, you're probably making a shit ton though. That's what I mean. Like, can you bank it, right? Do you bank it in the summer?
Yeah, you do, and that's the whole point of like the, maybe like Inuit people, right, or like northern native cultures back in the day before we had vitamin D
Yeah.
supplements.
Was that racist? Can you say that?
I don't.
I don't know what's politically correct
It's
anymore.
politically
Yeah, anyways.
correct. But anyway, but not only were they, storing the vitamin D in their fat cells, but they were also eating
They're eating lots of fat.
organ meats. Well, organ meats is the big one.
You said it's organ meats, but wouldn't it also be in the fat since it gets stored in the fat?
I don't know.
It gets stored in the fat with animals too?
Yeah, probably.
Like if it gets stored in the fats in humans and I just had myself a good human fat steak, I should get that though, shouldn't I?
You're like really scaring me right now.
I'm not saying I'm going to do that. I mean, if I get really hungry, I might.
Okay. So I don't know.
You're just not going to acknowledge that at all.
Just going to move on. But because, so I don't know if it's stored differently in the liver than in the fat, and then I don't know how that translates to ingesting it. I don't know.
Right.
But definitely organ meats, eggs, and fish are where you're going to get it from dietary. But again, that's only 10% of where you're
So you'd have to, basically you'd have to eat like a lot of eggs to be able to get your.
Like a lot.
Like how many IOUs are in one egg? I don't even care. I don't care. Don't even bother looking this up.
You're going to make me look this up.
I want to thank you for sticking all the way to the end of this as we're rambling about nonsense.
I'm so sorry.
You're sorry. I got to deal with this. This is ridiculous.
Anyways,
I'm sorry.
I hope everybody got something out of that. Vitamin D is important. If you're really concerned, go get your levels.
This is the bottom line.
Check your levels.
Just take some IOUs. You'll be fine.
What am I going to do with you?
Is that what we're doing? Join us next week as we figure out how vitamin C cures Ebola, right? Is that the cure?
I don't.
Oh, it's not a cure. It's a treatment, right?
Yes.
I don't know.
Anyways,
vitamins, they're good for you. Get those Flintstones in you.
Eat the good food to get them.
All right.
Have a great week.
You got it. Thanks for listening, watching.
Yep.
See you next time.
See you next week.
Bye.